They thought it was just another rescue, until a starving German shepherd led them to the one life he couldn't save alone. It was late afternoon on the outskirts of Redwood Valley, a quiet farming community where rolling hills stretched into the horizon and the air carried the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The sun hung low, washing the landscape in gold, the kind of light that made everything look softer, except for the road ahead. Lucas Hayes, a seasoned animal control officer with weathered hands and kind eyes, was driving back toward the shelter. Beside him sat Clara Monroe, a young veterinary nurse with a quick smile and a heart that carried more compassion than her small frame seemed able to hold. They had just finished a difficult rescue, a stray mare caught in barbed wire. The work had drained them both, and in the warm hum of the truck's cab there was the quiet satisfaction of having done something good. They were halfway home when Lucas slowed. Something lay ahead in the road. At first Clara thought it was a fallen branch, but as the truck crept forward, the shape shifted and stood. A German shepherd. His coat was dull and matted, tangled with burrs and dust. His ribs were visible beneath thinning fur, and he stood unevenly, as though favoring one side. But it wasn't his condition that made Clara's breath catch. It was the way he was looking at them. His amber eyes were locked on theirs, unblinking, filled not with aggression, not even fear, but something deeper. He took one cautious step forward, then sat down slowly, raising one paw into the air. The movement was small, trembling, almost human in its plea. Clara's hand moved toward the door handle, but Lucas lifted a hand. "Careful," he murmured. Years in the field had taught him that desperate animals could be unpredictable. But this shepherd didn't seem dangerous. If anything, he seemed desperate for them to understand. The dog glanced over his shoulder toward the tree line, then back at them. He took a few limping steps backward, stopped, and waited. Again, he looked toward the woods, then at them. It wasn't random. He wanted them to follow. Lucas felt a strange weight in his chest. "All right," he said quietly, easing the truck forward. The shepherd led them off the main road onto a dirt track that wound through tall pines. Branches scraped the sides of the truck, and the late-day sun fractured into beams on the forest floor. The dog slipped behind a fallen log, disappearing into the shadows. Lucas stopped the truck, and they stepped out into the cool, damp air. The shepherd was waiting for them. He turned and padded toward a tangled knot of roots beneath an old oak. Clara followed, her boots crunching over pine needles, and then she saw it. A tiny German shepherd puppy lay curled in the hollow, small enough to fit in Clara's hands. Its fur was dull, its breathing shallow. One hind leg was grotesquely swollen, the skin stretched and raw. The smell of infection hit her like a wall. Oh no!" Clara knelt, her voice breaking. The shepherd, his father, she guessed, lowered himself beside the pup and touched his nose gently to the tiny head. Then he looked up at Clara, and in his amber eyes was something wordless, but enormous. "Please." Lucas's voice was quiet, but certain. "We're taking them." Clara slid her hands carefully beneath the pup's frail body. It whimpered faintly, the sound so small it nearly vanished in the wind. She wrapped it in her jacket and held it close, feeling its tiny heartbeat against her chest. The shepherd limped beside them all the way back to the truck. Every step looked like it hurt, but he never fell behind. When they opened the back, he hesitated only a moment before jumping in, curling his body protectively around the bundle in Clara's arms. The drive to Redwood Valley Animal Clinic felt endless. Clara whispered to the pup between breaths, "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." When they arrived, Dr. Renee Caldwell met them at the door. One look at the pup's leg and her expression darkened. "This infection has been here for days. If it's reached the bone—" She didn't finish the sentence. The shepherd paced the room as they worked, his limp more pronounced now that he'd stopped walking long distances. Lucas noticed a deep, half-healed cut on the dog's foreleg. It looked like it had been caused by wire or a trap. His stomach burned at the thought. They started the puppy on fluids and antibiotics. He was too weak to eat or drink on his own, so Clara fed him nutrient broth through a syringe, drop by drop. The shepherd lay beside the crate, ears twitching at every faint sound the pup made. The first night was the hardest. The pup's fever stayed dangerously high, and every hour felt like it might be his last. Lucas and Clara took turns sitting with him, their hands resting near the crate so he could feel their presence. By the third day, there was the smallest change. Just a faint flick of his tail when Clara came in. "Hey there, fighter," she whispered. The shepherd's ears perked up at her voice. By the fourth day, the pup opened his eyes fully for the first time and held Clara's gaze. On the fifth day, he tried to stand. He wobbled, collapsed, then tried again. The shepherd pressed his nose against the bars, letting out a low whine that sounded almost encouraging. They named the pup Shadow. The shepherd they named Ranger. The days turned into weeks. Shadow's swelling went down, though Dr. Caldwell warned he might always limp. Ranger's wounds healed too, but his trust took longer. He flinched at sudden noises, avoided the sound of metal clanging. Slowly, with gentle patience, he began to relax, resting his head in Clara's lap and following Lucas from room to room. One crisp morning, the sky streaked with pink and gold. It was time for Shadow's first trip outside. The grass in the clinic's enclosed yard was wet with dew, and the air smelled fresh, new. Clara crouched and opened the crate. Shadow stepped out, hesitating as the cool grass touched his paws. His first few steps were uneven, his injured leg stiff, but then he found a rhythm, tail wagging faintly. Ranger followed close behind, his amber eyes never leaving the pup. And then, to everyone's amazement, Shadow broke into a run. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't far, but it was running. Ranger barked, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the morning air. Clara felt her throat tighten, her eyes blurring. "You did it," she whispered. Over the next months, the bond between Ranger and Shadow only grew stronger. They played in the yard together, napped side by side. Ranger watched over him the way only a father could, alert, patient, always there. When both dogs were strong enough, the shelter received offers from families wanting to adopt. But the idea of separating them felt wrong. Lucas and Clara knew that what had kept Shadow alive wasn't just medicine, it was Ranger's constant presence. And maybe, in some unspoken way, what had kept Ranger alive was Shadow. Through a partnership with a local farm family, they found the perfect place. A sprawling property at the edge of the valley, with open fields, a warm barn, and people who understood the kind of love these two shared. On the day they brought them there, the air was filled with the sound of wind in the grass. Ranger trotted over to Clara, pressing his head gently into her hands. Then he moved to Lucas, leaning against his leg for a long moment. No words were spoken, none were needed. They watched as Ranger bounded back to Shadow, the two running side by side into the tall grass. The sun broke through the clouds, lighting their path. Lucas's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I think they saved us as much as we saved them." What do you think? Can a starving dog lead you to a miracle? If this story warmed your heart, subscribe for more stories of hope and loyalty.